Hey guys, this is John, and this is an analysis of my second game from the Minnesota Blizzard versus Portland Rain match, which took place on January 11th. In this game, I have the black pieces against Grandmaster James Tarjan. Mr. Tarjan is an American Grandmaster. He was quite active in the 1970s and also into the 80s. Played some US championships, was prominent on the tournament scene, but then he took a long break from competitive chess, and he's only recently got back into it and started playing tournaments. And in fact, I think I saw him at the 2015 London Chess Classic. But this is our first over-the-board encounter. So I wanted to bounce back from my first round loss, of course. I was expecting an English in this game. However, I was not anticipating the transposition into the line you see here, which is the Panov-Botvinnik variation. And here, Grandmaster Tarjan plays bishop g5, which I think is the most ambitious move. And I play this kind of awkward-looking move, bishop e6, so blocking the e-pawn. This is not a move I would recommend to beginners. And in fact, in one of my chess fundamentals videos, I harp on this, how you don't want to play your bishop in a way that blocks your pawn so your other bishop can't get out. But there is some reasoning behind this move. One point about it is you can often threaten to play d takes c4 with the bishop backing it up. White would be unable to respond with bishop takes c4. And this dark square bishop, we can look to develop in a different way. So you'll see that I end up playing g6, looking to bring it to either g7 or h6. So Grandmaster Tarjan plays a3. This is in fact the mainline move. One idea with this a3 idea is to discourage black from playing queen a5, followed by knight e4. Because now if I were to play queen a5, he can respond with b4 and kick my queen back. So after a3, I play g6 in reply. As I mentioned, I got to get my dark square bishop out in a creative way. I actually saw a game that Alexei Dreyev beat Garry Kasparov back in 1996 by playing bishop g4 here. And Kasparov responded with f3, and then Dreyev brought the bishop right back to e6. So that's an alternative way of playing. That kind of highlights how unusual this line is, I think. So back to the game, after g6, Tarjan took on f6, so he trades his bishop for my knight in the process, doubling my pawns, and also giving me this isolated pawn on d5. So again, I would not recommend playing this line if you were a beginner player, because you can see that black is taking some liberties with his pawn structure. You have to know how to handle this structure. And I can't claim to be an absolute expert on this, but I do have some experience. I've played some games before, especially some blitz games in this line. So Tarjan plays bishop e2. I almost called him Tarzan there. Probably not the first time he's heard that. And I decided to put the bishop on h6. Afterwards, I saw in the database there were some games with bishop g7 instead, but I thought that the bishop would be a bit more active on h6, and also I kind of wanted to keep the g7 square open just in case my king had to escape over there. So I do have the bishop pair as compensation for my kind of raggedy-looking pawn structure. Oh, and note that I don't want to take on c4 yet, even though I mentioned black could try this at some stage. That is going to run smack dab into d5 if I play it too soon. So not going to play that move yet. So Tarjan plays bishop f3, applying more pressure to d5. And he's looking to force me to play d takes c4. That would be White's goal here, so he could get the d5 move in again. But fortunately, I have a pretty simple reply to bishop f3. And if you want to pause your video before I play it, you can do so. So the move is knight e7, bringing the knight back. This fits in nicely with black's setup, and I'm just reinforcing d5. Now in some cases, I may be in a better position to play d takes c4 because d5 would not come with a fork. Now here, I briefly looked at what would happen if White played queen a4 check. This is what I looked at when I was playing knight e7. And I actually had a half a mind to play king f8 and park the king on g7 like I was saying. I think also bishop d7 would be an acceptable reply to queen a4 check. So I just want to make sure I have something in mind against that. You can see that he instead decides to take on d5. And now which way to take back? I could take with the bishop, but I'd like to keep my bishop pair if possible, so knight takes d5 would be the move I'd like to play, and I did in fact play. So far, my time management is much better than the last game, where it seemed like right out of the gate I was under pressure on the clock. And I was already feeling pretty comfortable here. I felt like if I could get my king to safety next move, so castle, I would be in good shape going forward. The relieving of the tension in the center, I think, benefits black here. And in fact, on the previous move, I would be more worried about c5 as black here. I recall one blitz game I have, it's somewhere in my archive, where after c5, I kind of get squeezed on the queen side in this line. So I think that's probably how white should treat this position. Just advance, gain space, look to play b4, b5 in the future. So white plays knight e2. I castle, no use spending much time on that. And same goes for white too. He castles in 1 second. And the next few moves do come out fairly easily for me. So rook c8, just bring the rook to the c file. I'm not threatening to take on c3 yet. White does have this knight sufficiently defended by the b pawn and also the other knight. But this makes sense. We also get the rook off of the same diagonal as white's light square bishop. Don't want it aimed against that rook on a8. And already in this position, I think it's becoming a little difficult for white to find an effective plan. He plays rook e1. I don't know that this helps him a whole lot. White would like to maybe advance this d-pawn or make something of it in the center because for the moment, it's almost like he's playing with an extra pawn. My f-pawns are doubled and not playing a huge role. Well, they are covering some key squares, but white's d-pawn really stands out structurally. But my contention is that the d-pawn will be more of a weakness than a strength here. You can see that I have it firmly blockaded for the moment, so my hope is that I can apply long-term pressure to this pawn. Also note the role of my bishop on h6. This is not to be underestimated. The fact that the bishop controls c1 is extremely annoying for white because that means he can never put his rook on c1 so long as my bishop is standing sentry to that square. So here I play f5. I felt that this was a useful move. Advance the f-pawn, and also, most importantly, take away the e4 square. So white may have been looking to make a maneuver like knight e4 into c5. I got to be heads up about that. So I felt like f5 was a good investment in the future of my position. Just control that e4 square. So again, just taking a peek at the clock because these are 15 plus 2 games, very quick. And trust me, when you're playing these games, they go a lot faster than even what you feel they're progressing at as a spectator. So right here, I've got 12 minutes, 10 seconds, let's call it, and he's got about 11 minutes. So doing well on the clock and a comfortable position. So he plays queen d3, probably just trying to connect his rooks. I didn't think queen b5 was anything to lose a lot of sleep over, but I also felt I could easily prevent that move, so hence I just played a6, which could prepare b5 as well if I want to advance. And he plays rook d1. Seems to me that white is doing the right thing. I think he's recognizing that his position isn't great already, but he is making quick, logical moves and throwing the decision back at me. And that's an important skill, is recognizing when the position doesn't favor you. And of course, trying to improve that by moves over the board, but also being practical about the time situation. Because a really good way to compound a position that's already a little worse for you is to start spending a ton of time trying to will your way out of it when it's just not going to happen. So here I play b5, continuing with the plan that I set out with a6 a moment ago. Just advancing on the queen side. It's also possible I might be able to use the c4 square somewhere down the line. I didn't want to be the first one to take on c3. It did cross my mind, like, for instance, a move ago, to think about playing knight takes c3 in this position, but I didn't see a big reason to do so yet. If I take, he might be able to repair his structure slightly by playing b takes c3, but also just knight takes c3 and the b7 pawn is under attack. Also d5 could be on the horizon. So better to keep the tension in the center. So b5 instead. And white takes on d5, so we get a trade. Now he brings his knight to c3. So he's encouraging me to trade on f3. But I didn't have much interest in doing that. I would have been okay with the bishop trade had white initiated it here. One line I looked at is if bishop takes d5, queen takes d5, and now knight c3, because white might want to try to dislodge my queen. I thought queen b3 was extremely annoying for him. And then I'm pressuring the b2 pawn. I'm also taking a look at the rook on d1. I have rook fd8 coming up next. My bishop might even switch back to g7 if I want to pressure d4. If white ever advances d5, the bishop on g7 will be attacking the knight. So I felt like if I could initiate, or if he could initiate the trade but allow my queen to b3, that would be a positive development for me. But when he plays knight c3, I didn't want to take and forfeit my bishop pair, so therefore I played this bishop b3 move, attacking the rook on d1. He plays the rook to, a pretty passive-looking square all the way back to a1, but what were his options? Because again, the c1 square is covered by the dark square bishop, same with d2. b1 doesn't look so appetizing either, so I think he figured rook a1 was his next best choice. So I played bishop c4, attacking his queen. Note that here, white could be threatening knight takes b5 in some instances. Discovery on my bishop on b3. I guess I have bishop c2 or c4. So maybe I didn't have to play bishop c4. But it felt like the correct move, just kicking this queen away as well. He goes back to d1. So I've successfully forced white's pieces, his queen and his rook, back to their starting squares over the past couple moves. Here I played queen d6. Just trying to be practical with my time usage. This seemed normal to me. Get the queen off the back rank, connect the rooks. And roughly, my plan is to play rook fd8 and possibly bishop g7. I'm targeting this d-pawn now. Also from d6, my queen can operate on the queen side, so it could assist in a b4 pawn push. But in the short term, attacking the d-pawn is something I'd really like to do. White could try to kick my bishop back from c4 with a move like b3, but that would have the effect of weakening the knight on c3, so you can see if I just drop my bishop back, suddenly he'd have to attend to this now undefended knight. So white plays d5, probably anticipating attacks on the d-pawn. He just advances. On the one hand, I was happy to have encouraged that pawn to step forward onto a square where I can still attack it many times. But ask yourself, what might white be threatening now that d5 is played? So now that my light square bishop can't reach the e6 square, it's possible that b3 could be coming up. Not actually sure how big of a threat this is yet. If white gets another chance to play b3, I might be able to respond with bishop g7 and attack the knight, which again would be undefended. But I decided not to risk things here. So I wanted to make sure that b3 would not give me any huge trouble. So I played a prophylactic move with my next move. And that move was bishop g7. So bring the bishop back to its rightful diagonal, let's say. It did a good job from h6, whereas observing the c1 and d2 squares. But now I get to eye the knight here. And if b3, we can take on c3. I'm also controlling d4, so white can't play, for instance, queen d4. He responds with rook c1. I was thinking I had the initiative here. And I wanted to continue playing forcefully if possible. So therefore I played b4, attacking the knight on c3 and the pawn, trying to force a clash and a trade. You can see how trying to enforce your will on the opponent is something that really comes up in games between decent players. I've noticed this time and time again, and I've talked a lot about tension in recent videos. But already in this game, there's been a couple situations where it's advantageous to get the other guy to take you first. And here too, it's the same thing. After a takes b4, queen takes b4. My queen comes in with the nice effect of attacking the b2 pawn. So white has to respond to that. He plays queen d2, reinforcing. On my next move, I probably should have played it a little quicker. I was seeing if there was some way to capitalize on my pressure already, but white is solid enough. You can see that his two weakest points, b2 and d5, are reinforced by the queen. Also, in the case of d5, a couple other pieces. And if you look at my pieces, they're mostly participating. I'm very happy with the way my pieces are complementing each other here, but there's one piece that isn't doing a whole lot yet. So I feel I could have played this next move a little faster. It took me 44 seconds. And that move was rook fd8. An entirely normal move. Bring the rook to bear down on the same file as white's queen. Put another attacker on d5. I think another candidate move I was considering was rook b8, going after b2, but I don't have to play that move quite yet. So white plays h3. This creates luft for his king, so he'll never have to worry about a back rank threat. Can always move the king out here. And I think this is consistent with how he's been playing in the first half of this game so far. We're already on move 25. And by consistent, I mean he's playing quick, logical moves. He's not overthinking it. He's not trying to force his way out of a slightly worse position. So now I do play rook b8. I didn't think my rook was doing much on the c file, so I switched it to the b file to create the threat of queen takes b2. I think the move white played in reply to this makes perfect sense. At the time, I was thinking there's a chance he might play rook c2 to defend the pawn. But in that case, he always has to worry about bishop b3 with tempo on the bishop. Maybe he can just go back to c1 in that case. But there's another way to defend the pawn that makes it a little harder for me to attack the defender. Feel like I'm giving away a lot of these moves. This voiceover stuff is not easy, let me tell you. So rook b1. And at least now the squares that I can attack the rook on, a2 and this square, are covered. Funnily enough, I say that, but he could play, or I could play bishop a2 if I wanted, because knight takes a2 runs into queen takes d2. But I don't think it has much of an effect. I think he can just play rook a1 here. And if queen takes b2, there is, I think I looked at this line in the game. Yeah, there's queen takes b2, rook takes b2, knight takes a2 was the problem. So I don't want to go down that road. So on rook b1, I just played a5, calling up the a pawn. I had a feeling that this simple plan of a4, a3 would be a huge bother to white, because the b2 pawn is guarding the knight on c3. So if I can disturb that situation, then I've got a good chance of creating some major problems for white. Clocks are ticking down here. We're getting closer to a pure blitz game with a small increment. Remember, there's 2 seconds added per move. But white will soon be under 5 minutes, and I am not far behind. Makes me think that opening preparation in this league is huge. And I don't mean necessarily preparation for individual games, but the totality of your opening knowledge. If you can be very quick in the opening and know the associated middle game plans, or at least have a rough idea, that matters a lot. I mean, saving 2, 3, 4 minutes in the opening could translate to huge success in the middle game and a lack of time pressure, hopefully. So he played rook d1. I just continued with a4. I didn't see what rook d1 really did other than help to defend his queen, so I saw no reason to stop pushing the pawn. And white has to respond to a3, because if I get to play that move, he's going to be in dire straits. The threat will be a takes b2, and white will not be able to take due to the knight Remember, I've got the bishop on g7 backing up my queen. So he plays rook a1, covering the a3 square. And I saw this move when I played a4, but I kind of assumed there would be a tactic here for black. And I think I had my longest think of the game on this next move, deciding what to play against rook a1. So how to approach this position? Well, just like you're doing a tactics training problem, you want to look at forcing moves first. So checks and captures. Here there's no checks, but there are some captures. So queen takes b2 was the move I spent the majority of my time analyzing here. What are the ramifications of queen takes b2? And I'd highly encourage you to pause your video and ponder that yourself. This is a good calculation exercise. So what I calculated was if queen takes b2, white's going to respond with queen takes. I take with my rook. Now his knight on c3 is under attack. He can't play rook takes a4 here, hoping for bishop takes c3, rook takes c4 with an opposite color bishop position, because rook a4 is going to run into bishop b3 with the attack on both rooks. However, after queen takes b2, rook takes b2, knight takes a4, my rook is under attack. White has just established material equality. I saw here that I had rook b4, which would eye the knight and also unveil the attack on a1, but I couldn't figure out what to do against rook a3. And this is the position I had in my head while I'm pondering on that real-time board, as you see, and I just couldn't find anything here for black. There is a very good move for black, and if you spotted it, congratulations to you. I'm going to pause one more second just in case you want to stop your video and try to find it. So that move is rook b3, attacking the rook on a3, and this wins material for black. If rook takes b3, bishop takes b3, we have the same attack on d1 and a4, and also note that white can't play rook a1, bishop covers that square too. And if white backs their rook off somewhere, a2 is the only safe square. What does that leave? Rook takes f3, discovered attack on the rook on a2. So that's almost like a tactics trainer problem, and I just didn't quite solve it. Saw the key position, but did not see the end flourish here with rook to b3. Would have been nice. So catching up to the game again, after rook a1, I just played bishop b3. I decided not to play queen takes b2. And I recognized that I was already drifting into time pressure, so I played a solid move, keeping my advantage, defending the pawn on a4, hitting the rook. He did rook here. And I thought with the b-file being blocked up, I should probably just send this rook back to c8. And now I am threatening to take on c3 again, so there has been some pivoting over the past few moves. But I felt like I was still in control. I was still feeling optimistic. Times are even. Seemed like things were still going my way. So he plays rook c1, and I got very excited internally. I know you can't tell that based on my placid expression here. But on rook c1, I was like, do I have a way to just end this immediately? Because white's coordination still looks suspect. He's just hanging on by a thread, trying to reinforce c3 with all his might. But as that famous movie was titled, something's got to give. Okay, it's not very famous, but I remember seeing it in high school. Jack Nicholson. Okay, so I played a3. And I'm trying to undermine the defender of c3. And I figured he would be, if not just downright losing here, in a much, much worse position because the tension is reaching a boiling point and all my pieces are participating in the attack against c3/b2. So one key line here, if b takes a3, if white just plays the obvious move, yes, he is attacking my queen, but I can respond with bishop takes c3. I don't know if that's a detail that he initially missed or not, but this is the tactical basis for my last move. Hit the queen. If he takes my queen, I take on d2. Black emerges up a bishop. I also don't think white fleeing anywhere with the queen is going to bother me too much. Like queen h6, I should be able to handle that. I can probably just take on a3 up material. So after a3, he played the reinforcing move, rook e3. And again here, I had a bit of a think because it just seemed hard to fathom that white's position was being held together. My candidate moves here were still a takes b2, which unfortunately he can meet with queen takes b2, putting me in a pin. We're both pinned up after this. He's pinned on this diagonal, but my bishop's pinned. I didn't see a clear win here, or really anything clear, so I didn't go for that. The other move I considered was a2, so simply pushing past. This may not be a bad move, but I couldn't figure out what to do against rook a1, just putting the brakes on the pawn. He does have c3 sufficiently reinforced. I could actually probably do what I did in the game against this move, but... So those are my candidate moves. Taking on b2, also a2, in addition to the move I played. I believe I thought about f4 briefly here, which, looking at it after the game, the computer likes. I think my solution was probably the most human solution to the position, especially in time pressure. So I played bishop h6, skewering white tremendously on this diagonal. He's got all those minor pieces lined up, and the bishop returns to its former diagonal. So he takes on a3. I'm close to slipping under 2 minutes here. I spend 22 seconds on this move. Probably a bit too long. I think I should have just played. You can see I'm hovering over the piece with my queen. This is not something you can do in over-the-board chess, right? But in these online games, most everyone does this sometimes, or at least does it from time to time, taking a good look around before you actually drop the piece. But in over-the-board tournaments, there's the touch move rule. If you touch a piece, you have to move it. So don't expect to get away with that over the board. So queen takes a3. The point is I don't have to cash in on this pin yet. He's still hopelessly tied down here. So he plays rook e1. And again, John, you should just play this next move right away. I was trying to see, like, can I exploit this pin a little bit longer? Can I squeeze just a bit more out? But I spend about a quarter of my remaining time before just cashing in on the exchange. I think that's poor time management. I got to do better than that. He takes with the rook. So now the position is simplified a little bit. I have won an exchange, which means winning a rook for a minor piece. So I'm happy about that. I play queen c5 here. I wasn't comfortable with my queen being on the same rank as his rook. Well, there's some pinning possibilities if he moves this knight, so I just move this back. He plays g3. This gives the king an alternative escape avenue to g2. And even though I'm up in exchange here, with the amount of time I have and the solidity of the white position as it stands, I knew this was not going to be easy to win. My first order of business was just to try to swap a little bit, so hence I played rook e8, looking for the trade. If he plays rook d3 here, I think I was looking mostly at bishop c4, just trying to chase the rook, maybe some line like this, going after c3. c3 is also a loose point. So on rook e8, he did trade on e8. I'm a little ahead of myself here. You can see I already have that move pre-moved in the actual game. So yeah, we did get a trade of the rooks. So that helped me a little bit. Less pieces to worry about. Following the advice of trade when you're ahead. He plays king g2, just getting his king off the back rank. Now, this next series of moves, I have to say, was pretty planless by me. Obviously, I'm up the material, but I was first just trying to consolidate the material. And I was thinking about playing for the win later. I mean, obviously, I'm going to play for the win here, but the time was becoming such a big factor. I was focused on not blundering or losing on time. You can see me hemming and hawing about what to do about h4. h4 advances towards my king. It introduces some annoyances, like, you know, if in an ideal world for white, he would play h5, h6, queen g5, queen f6, and then mate me here. So at long last, I decided just to play h5. But that move cost 32 seconds. And I'm under a minute. Well under a minute now, so Those are precious seconds right there, even with the 2-second increment. Normally, I would play h5 right away in response to this, but I did have to make sure that if he takes on h5 and I take back and he goes queen g5 check, that I can escape the perpetual. And in this case, I can. My king is going to squirt out towards the middle of the board. He plays king h2. Not sure what king h2 was about. Probably just a move to throw the ball back in my court. He probably saw how long I was taking to think on each of these moves. So I move the bishop back to a6. I'm going to try to get the knight on c3 to move. So I had in mind like rook c8 is one possibility here. Although I didn't even end up playing rook c8 on this move. Just played bishop b7, direct the bishop against the d5 pawn first. This might have been a slight mistake, though, because it gives him the opportunity to make a mini maneuver. So you can see he plays knight e2, sending the knight to the more stable f4 square. Knights like stable squares. They like stables in general. Horses do. So he's going to plant that knight on f4 and basically challenge me to crack this setup. Because you can see he's got everything defended, especially d5. d5 is his pride and joy. He wants to retain that pawn. He's not going to be able to advance it, but if he keeps it solidified, I'm going to have a hard time winning. And this was tough right here. So I have 12 seconds left. I'm just firing off moves. King h2. You can see I play rook e8. No particular deep thought process behind this. We're just making moves here. He's just waiting. I'm also waiting. It's hard to build time on the clock, too, with 2-second increment. It's not that much time. I mean, if it takes, let's say, a second and a half on average to actually execute the move, then, you're not going to be gaining much time. So finally, we get to this position where I play queen c5, which was good timing on this. I'm hitting his queen and also the pawn behind it on f2. He avoids the queen trade, and I'm trying to chase him around here. And I know this is a little hard to follow with both the analysis board and the real-time board because it's going so fast. So if in doubt, just look at the real-time board. It's more accurate. So with queen b2, I'm looking to get the rook into c1. That was my idea. He's being pesky and avoiding the queen trade. So now I double up my major pieces on the second rank, attacking f2. He plays queen e1, reinforcing. And I go king g7 on my next move. Now here, I think he missed a pretty big chance, which in time pressure definitely could have confused me. So I believe right now he should have played queen e7. This is the move I saw upon deciding on king g7, but I just didn't have the time to consider the ramifications. But knight e6 check is very annoying. And if I take on f2, king g1, white is actually fine. So one idea is if I take here, then check. And white's going to be getting into my position. Note if king h7, there's queen takes f7. And I think this is a draw by perpetual. So yeah, queen e7 right there would have been super duper annoying. Going forward in the game, we just missed a key moment right there, but you can see that he took on h5. So he played queen e3 and then wound up playing knight takes h5. He didn't have to do that. And that turned out to be a mistake. So he's going for a perpetual against my king right now. However, I can escape it. And I got to say, I didn't see the full ramifications. I saw that knight takes h5 was possible, but I wasn't convinced that he had a perpetual, so hence I just went for this line. Not like I really have much of a choice after he takes on h5. So key position coming up here. So his perpetual didn't pan out. And he's getting pretty low on time, too. He's under 30 seconds. I've got my customary 10 seconds or so. Queen d4. Now I just want to block this d pawn. So I play bishop d7, and I set him up with the next move. I saw that his next move was possible, but I saw the refutation of it, and I was hoping he would play it. And he did. Bishop e4. This looks like it wins material because we're forking the queen and the rook, but this is the refutation. Take and then bishop c6, and I've got him skewered on the diagonal here. He plays king f3. He's still in the pin, so I don't have to take his queen quite yet. I just moved my king over. Not really necessary, but I just wanted to make absolute certain that I would be stopping this pawn. Plays king f4. I take. He takes with his king. I take on f2. And now it's just a completely winning position for black. The only counterplay white has is the d-pawn, and just to emphasize the point that the d-pawn is not going anywhere, I put my king on d8. And the rest of the game, I'm just going to stop the analysis board so you can kind of see what happened here. The rest of the game is not really worth analyzing. Black's up a rook and 2 pawns. I think he was just playing out of inertia. It is a fast game. You never know. Someone's internet could crash. But soon he throws in the towel. So, that was a 86 move game that I eventually won. See, I was happy about that. Went right down to the wire. So, a very complex game, especially with some of the tactics in the middle game. And I know I went through that ending sequence pretty fast. It was pretty bang bang. But right here, so after he played queen e3 and I responded with this bishop a6 move, he didn't have to play knight takes h5. I mean, I'm sure in time pressure there's other ways white can press me, maybe even by trying to move the d-pawn. I don't know if this was just a miscalculation or just trying to keep the attack going in time pressure, or a little of both. But yeah, even if he, in this position, after king h8, he played queen h6 check, but even if he takes on h5, I still will escape the perpetual. So king g8, queen g5 check, and again I can block on g7. He does get to go queen d8 check here, but I can play king h7, and white has ran out of good checks to give. So it did culminate in this incorrect knight sacrifice, which allows black to win. Also note that, like in this position here, he could play check, followed by taking the bishop on a6. But I am ready to play rook takes f2 after that. So let's just say like king e7, queen takes a6, rook takes f2. And this will be winning for black. I'm going to pick up the bishop on f3 next move. So that's how the game ended. Like I said, some cool tactics, especially in the middle game. I am disappointed that back on move number 28 right here, so I played bishop b3. I'm disappointed that I didn't see, after queen takes b2, queen takes b2, rook takes b2, knight takes a4, rook b4, rook a3. Disappointed I didn't see rook b3, which would have been a very nice way to cap this win in material. And I think if this had happened, I would have won easier than in the game. In the game, it was a crapshoot, based on the time pressure. Even after I win the exchange, he played pretty well. He found, like, for instance, when I switched the bishop to this diagonal, he found this knight e2 to f4 maneuver, which made things exceedingly difficult. And, I was definitely in danger of flagging or committing a serious blunder. But overall, happy to get the victory. And I just wanted to say thank you for the positive response on this voiceover style video. I know it's not a perfect format. It does require more editing than usual. But thank you for the nice things that you guys have had to say about this type of video. I'm glad it's useful to you and entertaining. And I'm not going to go over the remaining 2 games of this match. The Minnesota Blizzard, my team, did end up winning. So we won the match 10.5 to 5.5. So we performed pretty well. Everyone on our team had a positive score. I ended up going 1.5 out of 2 in the remaining 2 games. So I scored 2.5 out of 4 overall for this mini match. So not great, but also not terrible either. I just don't have time to analyze the remaining 2 games. But in this coming week, we're playing the Pittsburgh Pawn Grabbers, and I'm also in the lineup. So I don't think I'll be able to make any commentary videos for those anytime soon, because I'm actually going on a little trip to Montana from Thursday through Monday. But we'll see if I get around to making a video after that. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it.